Miniature Home by Gwendolyn Kiste. Abrielle skipped past the dead oak in the backyard and stopped in front of the miniature house. The diminutive Tudor was an exact copy of her family's home. Exact, right down to the ochre shutters. Ochre, what an ugly word, Abrielle thought. And what an ugly color, too. But ochre was the one thing her parents agreed on. They loved ochre, even if they didn't love each other. On hands and knees, Abrielle crawled through the Lilliputian door, but only after knocking. It would be rude to barge in on anyone who might be staying inside. The floor-to-ceiling paintings on every wall surrounded her. Renditions of well-made beds and newly upholstered sofas and Baroque tables and chairs filled the fake space, the same as they filled the main house. "I hate that place," she said to the nearest wall. "I hate it so much, and I don't want to go back. I want to stay here." She listened for a response. "You're wrong," she said. "I could dine on the dust in the air and drink the drops of rain from the gutters. I could get along just fine." Given a choice, she would have gone through with her plan, too. But Abrielle was 8, and no 8-year-old was ever given a choice. At dinner that evening, Abrielle's mother took 2 bites of her salad and declared she was finished. Abrielle's father nodded and slogged through each morsel as though savoring the meal would prove his wife's folly. Abrielle wished she could sprout wings and fly away. "I met a thunderbird this afternoon," she said, but no one seemed to hear her. After her parents had gone to bed, Abrielle snuck a candle from the library and returned to the miniature home. "Where's the dust and rainwater when you need it?" she asked the house, and giggled at what the roof said. Still sprawled across the bare floors, Abrielle awoke after dawn to find that no one had noticed she was missing. Heart empty as a drum, she pulled herself through the fake front door and stood in the backyard, glowering at the tiny shutters. With a swift thrash of her polka-dot rain boots, she kicked the second-floor window where her parents' bedroom would be, and a flash of ochre toppled into the grass. She smiled to herself and galloped back to the house. "That thunderbird came back," Abrielle said, slurping the sugared milk from her cereal bowl. "It swooped down from the sky and pecked the shutter right off its hinges." "That sounds scary," her mother said without glancing at her daughter. "Weren't you afraid?" "Why would I be afraid? The thunderbird was after the hinges, not me." Around lunchtime, a storm descended on the Tudor, and it decided to stay for dinner. From the lightning rod to the gutters, brew droplets pirouetted over one another in a grand rooftop ballet. And while everyone else thought the tempest was the same as any other spring squall, Abrielle knew better. She knew, sometime after midnight, the weight of the rainwater would command the shutter outside her parents' window to surrender. The battered ochre lingered on the sidewalk the next morning, and Abrielle proudly displayed her treasure for the miniature home to see. "Look what I did," she said. The walls tittered with excitement. "How can I grow wings?" Abrielle studied her parents over supper. "And not wax wings, either. If I am going to fly, I fly straight to the sun." "Not tonight, you're not," her mother said. "You have a dance lesson." Her father peered over the edge of his newspaper. "Don't be a shrew, dear. Let her go outside for a bit." Silverware clanged against porcelain, and no one said anything for a long time. Trapped between her parents, Abrielle wished she'd never thought about growing wings at all. Without uttering a word, her mother went to the closet and thrust a pile of hideous wool into the little girl's arms. That place is poison, Abrielle said, trudging past the oak tree that swayed in the wind. It makes my parents hate each other. It makes them hate me. The hinges on the miniature home sang a melodic tune as they swung open and invited her inside. Waiting in the library, the candle Abrielle had pilfered from the main house was already lit. "Thank you," she said, and pointed to a book on the far end of the painted bookshelf. "Alice in Wonderland." She grinned. "No, Abrielle in Wonderland." The acrylic library fluttered, and the words on the spine changed to reflect its new title. Abrielle pressed her hand into the wood grain until it yielded, and the book fell into her lap. The pages smelled clean and new, yet sandy and yellowed all at the same time. When she was done, Abrielle returned the volume to its rightful place and massaged her hands into the flush walls. "Perfect," she said. She leaned toward the candle and pursed her lips to extinguish it, but a distant murmur of a thunderbird beckoned her, and on its command she flicked the flame to the floor. The fire spread quicker than she expected, but Abrielle managed to slough the heavy coat off her shoulders in time to extinguish the blaze. Immune to the inferno, the walls never noticed the ruckus. Abrielle in Wonderland was safe. While she was at her ballet lesson that evening, a votive candle in the main library tumbled over without provocation and burned the carpet to cinders. The books, however, were untouched. Not one page contained so much of a singed corner. "This is a tragedy," Abrielle's mother said, burying her face in her hands as though this trivial mishap was the end of all happiness in her world. Abrielle wondered why her mother was so upset. The woman rarely read anything that you couldn't buy off a trashy newsstand, and, besides, all that was seriously damaged was some old rug. There was no reason for alarm. The next few days were quite the hubbubaloo. Abrielle watched from around corners and listened through walls as the real books were moved to storage, and a team of dour engineers assessed the structural integrity of the home. "Another accident like this," the foreman said with a clipboard and a scowl, "and the whole place will subside." Abrielle took this as an immediate challenge. The miniature home had to go. An axe would do it, but as much as Abrielle thought of herself as small but fierce, she doubted her upper body strength would be enough to demolish the building. She kicked the house repeatedly, but not even one more shudder would acquiesce. Storm clouds drifted over her. Abrielle asked them what their plans were, but the thunder answered a different question instead. "The tree would be perfect," she said, and glanced at the leering oak. All she needed to coax its lower branch onto her house was a slingshot. Unfortunately, Abrielle was never permitted any playthings that weren't as frilly as a tutu. "No daughter of mine will have boys' toys," her mother always said. But the little girl refused to let the oversight stop her. Fashioning a sturdy stick and a rubber band into a weapon, Abrielle prepared for war. 100 shots of gravel, and the branch lurched an inch. "Almost there," she said, and aimed her slingshot again. But before she could launch the next stone, the makeshift weapon was lifted from her hands. "Where did you get that thing?" her mother asked. "And why are you bothering the tree?" Abrielle shrugged. "To make it collapse on the miniature." Rubbing his temples, her father joined them but maintained a respectable distance from his wife. "I thought you liked your little house." "I do like my house," Abrielle said. "But if that branch destroys it, then another branch will destroy your house." Her mother frowned. "And why would you want to do that?" "Because," the little girl said, "the house is making us unhappy." After a moment, her father sighed. It's not the house, Abrielle. She stared up at him. Then what is it? It's us. We make ourselves unhappy. Abrielle shook her head. You're wrong. It's the house. This nonsense needs to stop, her mother said. You can't make the house collapse with some sad slingshot, and you can't grow wings either. I can grow wings if I want to, Abrielle said, and even if I can't, the Thunderbird will let me ride on his back. That will be just as good as having wings of my own. There are no wings, her mother said, and no Thunderbirds either. There are 2 Thunderbirds. One is heading here right now to save me. Gnashing her teeth at her parents, Abrielle scampered into the miniature house. The instant she slammed the tiny door behind her, a spark of lightning lit up the sky. Something cawed in the distance. Abrielle's mother looked around the yard. What was that? I don't know, her father said, and tapped on the minuscule shingles. Abrielle, I need you to come out of there right now. I'm waiting for the Thunderbird. He'll carry me off to his nest and raise me as his own. She thrust her head through the window that had no shutter. And that Thunderbird will raise me better than you can. Another flash of lightning. The storm was getting closer. Get out of there now, her mother said, or I'll drag you out. No! From the safety of the far wall, Abrielle's voice was muffled. The Thunderbird's almost here. With a decisive stroke of white, the storm reached down into the yard and split the oak in 2. And just like the slingshot had planned, the smaller branch cracked, collapsing onto one half of the miniature. Her parents screamed, and like mourners at an altar, they fell to their knees in front of the semi-crumbled playhouse. The shutterless window where their daughter had been was no longer a window at all. Now it was nothing more than splintered rubble. Baby, baby, her father murmured and tried to reassemble the pieces as though his child might be hiding among the ruins. My girl, my little girl, her mother repeated again and again as she clawed at the ground like a deranged gravedigger. What? Abrielle poked her head through the library window on the other side of the house. Her parents gaped at her. She rolled her eyes. I told the branch where to fall. Do you think I would stand in its way when it happened? Sighing and laughing and crying all at once, her father reached through the bisected home and pulled his daughter into his arms. Abrielle squirmed, but the torrent of coos and kisses weren't as bad as she predicted. Look! She pointed at the main house. The poison is gone. The remaining branches of the oak tree rested on the crushed roof of the Tudor. The family gawked at the derelict structure. A squawk from an unseen creature chimed in. Abrielle clambered to the ground. He's still on his way. Who is? Her father asked. The Thunderbird. Her parents stared at each other while their daughter investigated the shambles of the miniature, muttering, Okra, 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 as she kicked the broken wood and gnarled hinges. The rain increased its tempo, and the ethereal shrieking advanced toward the backyard. We need to leave, her mother said. I know, her father panted. But where should we go? The whisper of fluttering wings overwhelmed a burst of thunder. I don't care, her mother said. Anywhere but here. Abrielle skipped to the car. It's like a vacation. In the driveway, another wet screech greeted them, and this one was no more than a block away. Abrielle's mother searched the sky. Let's hurry, she said to her husband. He nodded, fumbling with his keys. I'll get us out of here as quick as I can. The sedan squealed down the narrow road, and Abrielle smiled as her father squeezed her mother's hand. At last, her parents agreed on something besides the color of shutters. Gwendolyn Kiste is a horror and fantasy writer based in Pennsylvania. Her fiction has appeared in anthologies including Strangely Funny 2 and Whispers from the Past, Fright and Fear, as well as online at Sirens Call Publications, Dance Macabre, and Dark Fire Fiction. You can find her at www.gwendolynkeist.com and on Twitter at Gwendolyn Keist.